Hey guys, hope you're all doing great. Today we're going to be looking at the SI function, the last remaining function to analyze, to parse, to undress, to unclothe, so as to get to the core fantasy behind this particular functional way of being in the world, because that's ultimately what we're interested in. To have a dominant function is to have a certain way of being in the world. Forget about the whole, like, oh, I have this function, which means that primarily my process inside means that this is related to X and Z. It's like the dominant function is, to really understand it, it's a way of being in the world primarily, right? We can try to use particular images and metaphors and models to kind of better understand, better simplify, provide a model in the sense of this particular way that we are in the world, which is always very complicated. It's always colored by individuals themselves. It's never unique. It's always moving. It's always shifting. We try to get a grip on it by simplifying, saying it belongs to this type or belongs to this function is also a way of classifying and simplifying. And we have found it useful, which is why we still use it. Okay, now that that's been said, SI is a function that I don't talk about perhaps as much as I do a lot of other functions, and I get asked a lot whether I could talk about it more. Of course, there's a lot of SI users, perhaps not a lot of SI dominance in my audience, but certainly a lot of SI users. And there's also the fact that NI dominants are often very interested in SI because they want to better understand how they're not SI. And in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to try to also understand how SI is a different response to a similar challenge that NI has to face. Okay, and we're going to be looking at it to some extent through that lens. SI takes a complex approach, as complex as the NI approach. So hopefully I can cover it all in one video, but possibly will have to be broken into two different videos. Now, before I move on, guys, don't forget that I need your support more than ever. I'd be so grateful if you consider supporting me on Patreon, for a small amount every month or every year. Try a small amount, a few dollars a month, a few dollars a year, or euros. You make a huge difference to help me continue with this channel. I could not do this without you, so please consider it. The first link below is to my Patreon page. Have a look, see if you find what you see there interesting. You know that if you do decide to join, you get access to a whole library of exclusive content where I discuss every 2 weeks topics called the deep dives, where you select the topic or we do select it in collaboration, conversation, because there's a lot of collaboration that takes place in my community. And those videos are usually 20, 30, 25, sometimes 30 minutes. There's already a rich library, exclusive access for patrons, as well as access to our Discord server. Come hang out with me, come hang out with us on a daily basis. Okay, now that that's said, let's return to SI. Okay, so it seems logical, it seems rational to think that the original fears and the original concerns in relation to the mother figure and the breast that manifest in early childhood for NI, and perhaps more generally for that stage of perception, also manifest in SI, right? After all, two functions of introperception seem to respond to similar kind of concerns and fears. It's not necessarily the case. We saw that NE responds to situations that I think happened a little bit later than the SE situation, still quite close, still within the first year of life for sure. In the case of the functions of judgment, it's a little bit later. In the case of the functions of introverted perception, I think it's earlier than judgment, but it's maybe a little bit later than extroverted perception. So imagine that you're facing the NI situation, as we talked about it. The mother figure is still fused with the child, becoming progressively more separate. There is this awareness of becoming a part of the merging, which comes with an idealization of the mother figure, right? Because this idealized state of fusion is then seen as being in the breast, okay? What infants, and there's plenty of evidence for this, psychoanalytically, especially seen as in the psychoanalysis of children. What happens is that the infant both idealizes the breast as the endless supply of riches, right, on which they depend, but also comes to a stage where they envy the breast. And this envy can only happen if there is a degree of separation that's already been affected, because otherwise why would they envy something that they themselves feel they are? Okay, and this envy, it often comes with an aggressive instinct. This aggressive instinct, which we call envious spoiling, is basically driven by the thought that, which is a very archaic and inchoate thought, that either I can be ideal like my ideal object is, or nothing can be ideal, and therefore I have to spoil it enough that it's no longer ideal. In the process, that's done in fantasy. The NI approach is this: destruction of the good object, and then realizations afterwards that one has done something irreparably bad and needs to be repaired. That's the source of the fantasy of repair. It comes initially from an aggressive response to the envious feeling. Now, when it comes to SI, my hypothesis is that SI deals with envy differently. It doesn't attack. It instead projects itself into the breast to fantasize itself as being in the breast or being the breast, so that it can recover its sense of being ideal. It can recover the sense of having the endless riches within itself. It no longer needs to feel the envy, because it is identified now with the breast through this process of projective identification, which, by the way, this is not something I came up with. This is well known, according to many circles, many psychoanalytic circles and psychiatric circles and psychological circles, to be projective identification, one of the earliest defense mechanisms of the child, one of the most powerful, and it consists in not just projection, right, in which you project certain mood states into other people. I'm angry, I'm going to project it into other people and they're going to be angry. In projective identification, it's more complex and it's in different stages. You project parts of yourself into someone else and identify with those parts. So if it happens in the case of SI, what happens is that SI projects itself into the breast, for example, and identifies with it there. Hence the fact that it no longer needs to feel envy. And that's a very interesting and creative solution. You can really praise the infant's creativity here in fantasy, in dealing with its destructive impulses tied to envy. So it no longer has to confront this power of envy. I think that the interesting question is, why does NI take a particular narrative route, the fantasy of destruction and then repair, whereas the SI approach seems to be a fantasy of projective identification with a good object? Possibly we can also link it back to the fact that NI and SE come together, as we know, and SI and NI come together. If you look at it through the prism of fantasy, you can actually see that SE, being a fantasy of limitless feeding, is aggressive, aggressively incorporative, aggressively hungry. It's hungry with the mouth, as I like to say, whereas SE is more hungry with the eyes. So SE is more aggressive, innately aggressive in terms of instinct than NE is, okay? If in the NI world there's, if you like, a role played by the SE fantasy that it's bigger than in the case of the SI fantasy, where the role with the NE fantasy is bigger. NI is going to be innately a bit more aggressive in relation to its envy than SI, which would then mean that it would be harder for the NI fantasy it would be harder to resist this impulse to destroy an envious spoiling. Whereas in SI, there's a possibility of a solution via identification. Okay, so SI, fantasy of identification, and in the case of NI, fantasy of repair, following fantasized destruction. Wrap your head around that. Don't forget that you can read books by me. By the way, give me a like for this video. It helps with the referencing a lot. My views have been a bit less lately, so it helps. My books on the INFJ, Ecstatic Soul, all about the inner life of the INFJ, the inner world, thoughts, consciousness, and this is about, the Infinite Soul is about the outer life of the INFJ. INFJ is in the external world, how to find meaning, purpose and value. These books go well together, and if you want a deep understanding of this type, namely the INFJ, you need to read these books. They're linked below. Thank you very much, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow for maybe a bit of an elaboration of the link between SI fantasy as we've explained it and the SI character. All right, see you soon, guys. Bye bye.